good evening, everybody. Thank you for that. I'm Carl Lestruder. I'm the director of the School of Architecture. I'm thankful that the College Program Committee granted me the opportunity to introduce tonight's speakers. I offer my appreciation to the committee, who's made up of Mark Stanley, Scotty McDaniel, and Julie Kress for their work. Also, shout out and thanks to Jenny Flatford for organizing this event. I have the pleasure of introducing the leaders of Patterhn-Ives, Anna Ives, who's the managing partner, and Eric Hoffman and Tony Patterson, who are founding partners. Before I go into more detail, though, I also want to note that these architects wouldn't be here today without the initiative of AIA East Tennessee. Their support of this lecture represents the unique synergy between academia and practice. While the premise of hearing from the most compelling practicing architects is, of course, on its own a compelling proposition, Patterhn-Ives is an especially fitting guest tonight, given their own legacy and purposeful commitment to both teaching and practice. I learned today that their practice was incubated at WashU, where for a moment 2 of them studied and 1 of them taught. Now all 3 of them have taught. Or are teaching, depending on the tense. Patterhn-Ives has received significant attention for their work, too many to list, but they include Learning by Design Magazine's Outstanding Building Award, the AIA St. Louis Design Merit Award, the AIA St. Louis Design Honor Award, the AIA St. Louis Design Citation. Those are 3 different kinds of awards, but they didn't just win each of those just once. There are a number of them. They also recently won the 2022 National Stone Institute Tucker Design Award and the AIA Central States Region Design Honor Award, as well as the AIA Central States Design Merit Award. I've heard Patterhn-Ives described as generous, and they are known for purposeful, crafted language of collaboration and sensitive discourse. I know many of us are thoughtful, just like they are, about the institutions that they make and the institutions that they are a part of, including the institution of a campus. I'm very confident, I'm supremely confident, because I've seen their slides actually since I wrote this, that we'll be hearing about some of their work impacting multiple campuses, including their own Washington University. I think it's super impressive to see that level of impact on an institution coming from the inside out. I also know that Patterhn-Ives is committed to the city of St. Louis and the region of the Mississippi River watershed. 2 themes that I think will resonate with many of us profoundly. I know from studying their work that they are willing, if necessary, to be almost invisible. On the other hand, they're inclined to take major risks in the design and advocacy of intense, charged, and resonant spaces. Also, if you send their Instagram a direct message, one of their partners will reply. Not that you all should do that, but I was sliding into DMs before DMs was a word or that phrase was a word. Like, I know how to network digitally. Okay, back on track. It is a rare opportunity to hear from the complete leadership team of a firm, not just a single person representing that firm. This lecture will be an interesting study of collaboration on display that I'm looking forward to. But I do want to just introduce the 3 of them individually, because it is my understanding, despite the implied nature of the lecture title, that they are 3 distinct persons. Just real quickly, Anna Ives is the managing partner and a lecturer at Washington University in St. Louis. In 2009, Anna was among 30 outstanding St. Louis area business professionals selected by the St. Louis Business Journal to receive a 30 Under 30 award. Eric Hoffman is a founding partner of Patterhn-Ives and was the recipient of the 2013 National AIA Young Architects Award and is a professor of practice. Tony Patterson is a founding partner of Patterhn-Ives and has been consistently recognized for clarity in design thinking and strength of total project vision. After graduating with honors from the Fay Jones School of Architecture at the University of Arkansas, Tony worked in the acclaimed office of Marlon Blackwell, who has a unique and recent connection to this place. With that, please join me in welcoming Patterhn-Ives.
Okay. We have it. Good evening. Can everyone hear us? Yeah, great. Thank you for the introduction, Carl. It was amazing. We've prepared a few introductory comments, but we want to try and get to the project work as quickly as possible here. But to begin, on behalf of Anna, Tony, and myself, and really everyone at Patterhn-Ives, we're just thrilled to be here tonight, be in Knoxville with all of you, and be at the University of Tennessee. Let's see here. Make sure this is working. It was just working a second ago. All right. We'll pivot. Yeah. Pivot. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Where were we? Oh, I should really start to mention, I'd like to begin by noting that I lived in Johnson City when I was a child, and I was here in 1982 for the World's Fair. I shared that with a few folks earlier today, and it's really amazing to be back in the city. It's pretty amazing the way time works, and the way your memory works, and the way I remember things very vividly today after taking a tour around the city. It's really wonderful to be back after many, many years. I think this whole thing is locked up. Oh. It's working now. Oh, there it goes. I think it just went to sleep, folks. All right, we're on it. We're here today largely, in parts, I believe, due to a recent exhibition of work entitled South 40. Coinciding with the Venice Biennale, Patterhn-Ives was among 40 design practices represented from south of Highway 40, spanning from the Mississippi River to the Atlantic. We were honored to be included among some of the most recognized practices in the country, including Knoxville's very own Sanders Pace Architecture. And a big thank you to Brandon and John for their generous time today, taking us around the city. It was this kind of amazing opportunity that we cherished to be among like-minded individuals, and we love the idea of being here today with you. For us, there are many tenets that drive our work, and as the title may suggest, we believe in the promise of a return that is greater than what's been asked of us. And hopefully you'll see that in the work shared today. We are architects dedicated to arts, education, and community with a wide range of experience, including intimate scaled work along the coast of Nova Scotia, regional expertise in higher education and planning, and signature work with extensive resources and global project teams. Tonight, we also thought we would mention that all three of us have taught at the university level. We understand what each of you go through day in and day out, both on the faculty side and the student side. And that maybe if we, leave nothing else, there's nothing that can replace the feeling of being inside and inhabiting a project that you've designed for the very first time. So we look forward to each one of you having that experience in the very near future. We look forward to sharing with you today how we seek to capture unfound potential, the plus one, through the lens of care and curiosity, memory and meaning, poetic and pragmatic, and obstacles and opportunities. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Tony Patterson to introduce our first project.
everybody hear me okay? Great. So we wanted to start the first project. We're each going to tell a little bit about 3 different projects. And this one is the Kol Ranah Synagogue, located in St. Louis. This project started in 2017, and believe it or not, this project is still going. We just, I think last week, got a building permit for the next phase on this project. The quote here from Juhani Pallasmaa is, we think, quite fitting for this project. I think we all agree and feel honored and grateful to be a part of a project like this. And in a lot of ways, this project is a good example of why we started our practice. In a way, seeking out projects of this nature where we can develop deeper relationships with clients and with institutions. You know, how can we deliver more service, be of more use, and just contribute to communities? And so, to begin, this is a project that joins 2 legacy Jewish congregations in the city of St. Louis. These 2 congregations are coming together, and they're doing so after purchasing a new property. So they're actually moving from 2 previous synagogues into 1, and they purchased this property in Clayton, where our office is located. The existing site, a beautiful site, actually had a 1950s era Baptist church. And actually the Baptist congregation that was there currently and the Baptist church switched properties with one of the synagogues. And Kol Ranah now, in this new property, our task was to help try to unify these 2 legacy congregations. And from a very early stage of the project, we advocated very strongly for this idea of building a new addition. There was actually an architect previously involved in the project who had actually proposed the new sanctuary space would be in the old Baptist nave. And we felt for the success of the synagogue long term, really would require a new identity for Kol Ranah. And so that required, we felt, a new space to worship in. And that's where the idea of the building addition started. One of the common themes that we hope that you can see in our work is just a careful attention to site and relationships to context. So this property being at a kind of a critical juncture between a residential community and a business district. The existing property and Baptist church and school building kind of was basically a poorly defined front yard space. And so we really felt if we were going to propose the building addition, how can the building addition serve multiple functions and do multiple things, not just one thing? It's going to contain the new sanctuary space for worship, but how can it also organize entry? How can it create a courtyard space? And in some ways, the 1 + 1 = 3 in this project. A good example here is the careful siting of the building addition to create this essentially value-added space of the courtyard, the space between the 2 buildings, and how that could become almost an exterior space, an exterior room, so to speak. In terms of obstacles and opportunities, the site offered many obstacles for this project, incredibly tight site to get everything done that needed to get done. To create a new entry for the entire synagogue, the building addition reorients everything to the west, creates a new fully accessible entry from the sidewalk to the front door of the synagogue. Within that zone, there's a creation of a sloped walk at 1 to 20 slope that meanders through a kind of a new garden space, what we're calling the informal garden, around a series of mounds and terraces that also collect stormwater. So we're, again, you can kind of see the theme of trying to do multiple tasks with one architectural move. So the accessible entry also serves to collect stormwater on the site. The creation of the courtyard space obviously was a critical component for the project for us. Organizing parking, creating a new drop-off loop for the early childhood center component of the project, which is a primary component that took a lot of planning. Also required site planning for outdoor play spaces for the early childhood center. The other critical part of the site plan is in section. The existing building was a split level condition, a problem that many buildings of this era face. And so the precise location of the finished floor level of the addition, we were trying to push it as far vertically as high as we could get it to essentially what we were calling split the split level. So to ease the condition inside the building and better connect spatially the addition to the existing building. Also, you'll notice the linchpin of the project was the elevator, the position of the elevator to make the split level condition of the existing building and the addition fully accessible on all levels. This was also one of the most rewarding, I think, parts of the project was kind of significant collaboration with an amazing landscape architect, 10 by 10, out of Minneapolis. If you guys don't know their work, you guys should look them up. It was amazing to just collaborate with them fully on this project. Amazing experience. And I think collaboration you'll see ties through that on the other projects that are talked about today, and hopefully through all of the work. That's something that we try to do on every project. One of the keys we think to doing better work is to be working with better engineering, architecture consultants, interior designers, any other discipline that we can bring to the project will ultimately, through that collaboration, create better projects. Here you can start to see the plan organization of the project. Essentially, the existing building was a double-loaded corridor. We removed one side of the double-loaded corridor for all of the kind of primary spaces, and then to the north, left all of the existing spaces there for religious education classrooms and support spaces. And then you can start to see here the lower level where the early childhood center. This is all early childhood center here. And in both cases, on both levels, you can see the strategy to pull program away from the exterior wall. And that was largely a cost-saving strategy and ultimately saved a lot of cost in the project. Some process photographs here. This site is located essentially 4 blocks from our office. So site visits were quite easy to get to the site. So we made lots of trips to the site to monitor construction. You can see here some of the masonry construction going up of the addition. Here you can start to see the kind of carving happening on the exterior of the project. And then some of the precision of siding here in this photograph, where elements of the existing building are framed by apertures in the building addition. So in section, you can start to see the connection from the existing building to the addition, and then the sanctuary starting to give shape, a kind of heavily sculpted interior, largely for acoustical reasons. We had an amazing acoustician on the project as well. And then the north clear story being a kind of an unexpected condition. So not revealed to the exterior. You don't necessarily ever see the north clear story until you're in the sanctuary space. And the ambient illumination is quite remarkable. There's really not much need for artificial light in this space because of the north clear story. And whenever we tour people through this space, we always like to turn the lights off. Actually, it's the best way to see the space. And then as well, so the interior of this space really is all about natural light and acoustics. Those were our primary drivers in every decision that we made. The sculpting on the interior was all about acoustics and natural light. The flat floor of the sanctuary provided maximum flexibility for the synagogue. And in large part, the project is very inwardly focused, and that's on purpose through a lot of discussions with the ownership group. This idea that being a part of a community and worshiping together as a group and only getting glimpses to the exterior world. The splayed wall largely started as an acoustic idea about creating non-parallel walls. The interior of the space really is tuned for unamplified speech and music. There's also a nod to actual true east, cardinal east, versus the building is sitting slightly, the urban grid is slightly off of east, and so as a Jewish community, the arc wall always facing east. The splayed wall tracks more or less to cardinal east. But it's also about natural light, so you get the kind of west light through that cleft in the south facade, and then that move also then activates the street facade to the south. So again, this idea of doing as many things that we can do through very subtle manipulations of the form of the building. So here, turning back to the exterior, the limestone of the addition. Really, the idea of the limestone came from the context, looking at adjacent buildings. There were a few adjacent buildings that had limestone as part of their facade, but also there was existing limestone trim on the 1950s era Baptist church. But once we started to kind of identify stone as the material of choice, the Colorado ownership group also were after a 100-year building. So we knew that limestone would be a great material for that. We really returned to this project. This is the Portal House. This was the very first project in our office. This was a private residence located in Louisville. It was going to be clad entirely in limestone. So when this project went all the way through construction documents. Unfortunately, it was not built, but through the course of working on this project over a couple of years, we did a kind of a deep dive into limestone and what you can do with limestone cladding. We took trips out to stone quarries, talked to a lot of stone fabricators and stone masons about stone detailing. How thin could you cut a piece of stone and have it, how much breakage are you going to lose in transport? A lot of time and energy spent on the stone cladding for this project. We landed on a stone coming from the Flint Hills in Kansas, which is kind of a dark gray, and ended up returning, although that project was unbuilt, for the Colorado Synagogue returned to that material and employed a lot of those techniques for this project. And I think a good lesson for students and architects alike, that the energy and time and effort that goes into these projects never is ever lost. The act of going through and working on that, doing that research, ultimately paid off in a different way. And I think it's a good reminder to all of us that we don't necessarily know when that might happen. An example, a shop drawing process where every stone panel on this project was dimensioned. And the qualities that the stone gives in the final finished condition is quite beautiful. The time of day, the season, if you're getting precipitation or not, the facades on the building are kind of constantly changing. And really, one of the biggest takeaways from this project is just being a part of the Cole-Renaud community. They were extremely welcoming and warm to us. They basically made us a part of their community. And the project was designed early on. The decision was made to design the entire project and then go back and phase it to help their fundraising efforts. This was all privately funded and broken into multiple phases. Anna led this project all the way through, start to finish, and still going on the next phase. But an incredible amount of work just in terms of repackaging the drawings, getting all the permit approvals in place. But something that we were committed to because it really was a partnership with this ownership group. Here, a view into the Early Childhood Center. Really a testament to the power of architecture to really unify and strengthens the communities that we're a part of, and something that we believe in deeply. So with that, I'll pass it over to Eric.
Thank you. Is the mic still working? Yeah, if you're in St. Louis, it's really an amazing project. It's really extraordinary. And one of the things that I always took away from that project is the congregation relaying to us personally that they felt like the project was a miracle, because they had been told so many times by so many different people that they couldn't do this project. And for us to come in and help them do it in a smart way and with this level of success and care and execution is really a testament to everyone's involvement. So, it's nice to hear. Let's talk about it and reflect on it, because it's an extraordinary project. Hope each of you get to visit it someday. So we're moving on to the middle act of the 3-act play here. We're really excited to share, this isn't the actual project, but we're excited to share this middle project because it's the first time we're really able to share it. It's sort of recently been completed, and it'll be fun to talk about it. So, but we thought we had to begin, again, with this quote in a project, one of our very first projects, Ellis Hall at Missouri State University, which is a school of music, where we basically took a building that hadn't been touched in over 50 years and helped the university and the department resolve innumerable issues. And we took a tired auditorium and transformed it into a state-of-the-art recital by actually carving into an existing building. And we had to do a lot of convincing and hand-holding to get people to buy in on this. But once we did, it solved so many of their issues. And the other thing that we did is we took basically what was an abandoned service courtyard and sort of reestablished it and created a foundation for the project to come, which is a connection to what will become an art park for their College of Arts and Sciences. And just take note, there's a balcony up here. You can see a few folks. We'll revisit that at the very end. But the other thing that we did on Cole and on this, and you'll see it in most of our work, is just sort of the economy of means. And this was something that came up in the South 40 as a kind of a common thread among all those 40 practices, is just sort of trying to do as much as you can, or the most with the least, right? And so all of the budgets on all of these projects that you see are very, very lean and very small. But it brings us to a tent. This is Tent Theater. And there's a rich tradition of tent theater in Springfield, Missouri. And we'd like to start with just a short video that gives you some history and context, and then we'll kind of dig into the project. But this is the existing setting. They're setting up here. But this was the most current iteration of the tent theater for the project before we became involved with the project. So anyway, let's see if this works. Cross your fingers.
During hot summer in 1963, a tent was erected at Missouri State University to house a series of summer performances conducted by the theater department. Conceived by Robert Gilmore and Irene Koger as a response to inadequate facilities, Kid Theater was born. Emblazoned by Tangerine and Green, the inaugural production was so wildly popular that it quickly outgrew its initial circular venue, prompting a series of expansions and modifications to both its capacity and format over the next 50 years. Binoculus at each primary tent post was the common signature among those many variations of this now annual event. Approaching the 60th anniversary, the festival has become synonymous with the region's summer offering, attracting thousands of theatergoers to a unique affair in which students perform alongside professionals. This historic event warrants a venue which reflects its legacy within the current trajectory and contemporary needs of Missouri State University and the surrounding region. The focus of this transformation centers on both site and shelter, a reimagination of the campus quadrangle as well as the venue itself. An inclusive outdoor pavilion for the performing arts evolves from a temporary festival to a site of year-long engagement and events. Two large, accessible paths form a series of renewed outdoor spaces which host an array of formal and informal programs, including an art park. The envisioned canopy synthesizes all performative requirements into a single pavilion that dramatically enhances the experience for both actor and audience while recalling its origins and intent.
Sort of touch on a lot of really important points. First of all, and perhaps the most important, is just really beginning to understand the context of the university and how to allow this project to grow naturally, logically, poetically out of its context. The project we showed you before was here, Ellis Hall, and this was the recital hall within this volume. That courtyard that was, tired to say the least, sat here. And this is Craig Hall. This was their main theater building on campus. And what's worth noting here is the way they drew this plan that really was kind of like a figure ground, where they really thought about the campus sort of quadrangle and fabric really moving through the building, and that it was really a pavilion that held a number of kind of objects underneath it. In the main path, as you approach the tent, which was this sort of oblong piece for many years, really became sort of a stop. And the main sort of drive behind this project and this sort of reimagination of that campus quadrangle was about allowing that sort of movement path to pull through and take advantage of the existing topography to allow the theater really to sort of sit not in opposition to that, but in concert with it, resulting into this kind of amazing 4 quads within a larger quadrangle. And our work, which began as a study and then became the actual project, led to not only the college becoming a named college, receiving the largest gift in university history to support that college, also the naming of the art park in all 4 pieces, but also John Goodman becoming the named benefactor for the facility. This is how it transformed in its reality. This piece sits sort of perfectly in line with the existing theater and picks up on any number of cues from the existing context. But maybe just as to stop and to sort of reflect, there's this kind of amazing ability for this building to transform from this sort of open, airy, naturally ventilated pavilion to basically what amounts to a black box that's completely dark for a theater setting where this kind of other world can take on for any number of performances. And literally people come from all over the country to attend performances here, and they're really remarkable. I hope each of you get a chance to visit someday. It all began with a lot of analysis and testing. That's something that we believe strongly in, as I'm sure most of you. But it was this slipping condition that we've talked about that really started to resonate where we were taking advantage of the existing context and topography. You'll notice that the topography was actually quite slight, barely noticeable if you were walking it. But as you cut the section, right, and start to study the sight lines and all of the things that it needed to do, it actually was sort of setting up the theater perfectly. The way we imagine the project, it's pretty incredible how closely it came to being fully realized in terms of its sort of essence. But where we began in some of the early struggles and the things that we were trying to overcome, right, talking about obstacles and opportunities, and some of this was self-imposed, right? The university wanted us to develop this project out of fabric as a nod to the original tent. And so from there, we started to develop, how can we do the most, again, with the least, and how charged can we make that surface. And so the curve that you saw there just for a little bit, that line, really became the critical study of how does that one piece of fabric do any number of jobs. Sound diffusion, water management, resisting projectiles through a fabric. Let's see here, I've got my list. Light transmission, sound containment, and sound diffusion. And at the end of the day, it also had to have a complex curvature. I know I was talking with Scotty and Carl and everyone, there's a lot of computation and things going on in the school. We'll share a few things, but at the end of the day, it's that complex curvature that was necessary to maintain a taut fabric surface. And so by holding one edge aligned and twisting and torquing and creating that curvature, we wound up with that double curvature that gave us everything that we needed, all within a framework that we had to contain all of the other systems of the project. Anna, Tony, and I, we all have a strong belief in integrated work. And this one was particularly challenging because there was no finish to hide behind. You're dealing with steel and a single layer of fabric basically as the container for everything that had to support the project, including obviously all the natural artificial light, theatrical lighting. There is some mechanical systems, and then obviously the acoustics were quite critical for any of the number of things that they wanted to house within the facility. A couple of construction shots to begin to capture just kind of the beauty and the simplicity of the diagram. It's really a kind of a simple sawtooth diagram, a repetition of bays. Each bay is a bit unique in terms of all of the things that it had to contain, and then the nod back to the skylights and the original sort of tent posts. This photograph really does a nice job of capturing kind of the kind of beautiful brutality of the original Craig Hall Theater building and this concrete and stone pavilion that encapsulated all of the programmatic pieces below. And you also get a sense of the stage house, which was kind of a unique second component to the project that allowed any of the number of services to come together. There's a condition of the project that you really cannot understand unless you visit it. And so I'll try, use maybe some hokey PowerPoint diagramming here to help convey it. But we have got the pavilion up above that's clad in limestone, and just below it, the structure is revealed as a exposed concrete. The pavilion is supported by a series of paired columns, and then we also have the fly loft, which is clad in this sort of dark copper that reveals itself as it moves through the pavilion. And in many ways, we looked at that very carefully and sort of tailored the project to those material strategies and those structural strategies. So you'll notice the columns are paired. We needed that for a number of reasons. One, we would rather have two smaller columns than one big, heavier column. We had so much stuff running through those columns that we needed all of the dimension that we could to run systems through them. And then we also took that and we started to develop the material strategy. So in some ways we began at the above with the shaping and the acoustic needs and the light transmission needs of the pavilion. But then it was really fun to start at the ground and let it sort of work its way out of the earth in a way that sort of feels uniquely connected to that Craig Hall building, which it's basically a sort of a sibling to. So we have this exposed concrete stone cap using sort of maquettes in our office with samples and things. This piece of stone weighs at least 200 pounds. And was we moved it twice, in recent years. But those were really important for us to begin to understand the real sort of nature of how this thing would come together. And the photographs of it here does sort of a nice job of showing the stone, the concrete, the pairing, and how those sort of elements and components make their way through the project. As we move into sort of the detailing that was necessary for the project, I'll talk about sort of the pandemic in a second. But these stretch fabric systems are quite unique and in many ways proprietary. And so we had to do a lot of research and make some assumptions and try to sort of stay ahead as possible of all of the things that we might anticipate during construction. Once we were able to sort of do that and get all of the kind of key engineering partners a part of the project, the analytical piece of it was really pretty fascinating in terms of analyzing every connection, every piece of fabric to make sure that it was working within the limits of the material and the steel. As I hinted at before, these thin little columns are stuffed full of conduit and systems. And, it's one thing to detail, devices around drywall and other finishes. It's another one to sort of integrate those into, architectural exposed stainless or structural steel. So we're seeing lights, reveals, stainless steel, plumbing, amazing amount of work in terms of the coordination it took to pull all that together. And it was also fun to start to work with our consultants and our team to take the project and actually refine it even further during construction. And one of the real sort of amazing opportunities was in order to lighten the overall amount of steel we had in the project was the development of the sort of flying masts to support the skylights. So it's this really kind of incredible moment when these things are sort of stretched up and basically following through on the intent of these original tent masts that are basically, just illuminated to the sky. As many of you are aware, the pandemic was an amazing event in all of our lives that none of us have ever experienced before. On the left was the end of February 2020 when we kicked off, and on the right was literally 2 weeks later. University was shut down. We were not allowed on site. Shift completely overnight to a virtual setting, under contract, no change in schedule, and just making it work. The intent for how the project was going to be constructed, the entire process turned upside down overnight. And we didn't miss a beat. We still issued documents on the day we agreed to in our original contract. The result really is a series of beautiful moments. Here we're seeing the passageway that runs right through the middle of it. One of the things that we wanted to resolve that was not possible in the original tent theater was to make the facility fully accessible. So actually by siding the project the way we did, there are any number of ways for any person with any bit of any ability to occupy that the tent, which is really a pretty amazing feat, and something that we worked really closely on with our internally and with our theater consultant. Again, the way the project was represented in the transformation to the actual is pretty remarkable how closely we were able to come to what was a very quick and very conceptual study at the beginning. The daylight underneath the tent is really remarkable. And it's hard to see here, but one of my favorite views of the tent is actually in the reflection of the dark glass on Craig Hall, where you get this sort of fractured version of it. But it's really been incredible to see the university taking occupation of it, learning how to use it, it becoming part of the campus. And in many ways, that's the part that's been the most rewarding, is to sort of see how it feels like it's always been there, sort of an integral part of the campus. And that balcony that I pointed out earlier is on the left, and that's a photograph of Tent Theater during the construction of the original project, and to the right is the finished component. As I mentioned, the way you can get a sense of it here, but the way the topography works and really just sort of nests the rake and the seating and the sight lines within the theater. And when it's not in use as a theater, it becomes this kind of amazing resource and amenity to the campus. And they've hosted any number of events, including dance, performances. They're going to start a jazz program. There was a trombone concert a few weeks ago. So it's really, really rewarding to see all of that come together. And to end, the project took much longer to finish because of the pandemic and any number of sort of supply chain logistics. All of the things, right, we've all dealt with, became even more challenging in a project like this. But to sort of see, actually after beginning at a point of isolation, right, and to end in a moment where you have hundreds of people coming together from all over the country as a community was something that will be quite special for some time. And so, yeah, and we'll all thank Mr. Goodman for his donation to help make it a reality. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna to take us home here. Sure.
All right, so the last project we're going to share today is McKelvey Hall, which is at Washington University. And this project is also a pandemic project, but I guess actually all three of them really were in some ways. A unique project for our office because it really capitalized on both of our practices of historic preservation and more modern construction. So we have a historic preservation studio, which is located in Pennsylvania. And this connection is actually my parents are architects. They have had this studio for more than 30 years. And as our practice grew and they were ready to retire, there was a certain point where it just made sense that they could continue to do what they love, but not have to worry about, is there paper in the copier, which is really what they were trying to retire from, not from the practice, because they really just truly love the clients that they've gotten to know, and it's a really community-minded effort when you've been doing that kind of small-scale, hyper-specific work for that long. So this was a great opportunity for us to test drive on a pretty big project for a great client in St. Louis. So the campus, the Danforth campus of Washington University, is actually the second campus of WashU. So they were originally located downtown. As the downtown got busy and commercial around the 1900s, there was a lot of money donated to move the campus out into the country. So the first building that was built was Brookings Hall, which you're seeing in this photo. You can see it's a little bit elevated up from the lower part of the campus. This is sort of the, evolved from this time to what it is today. There's sort of a lower part of the campus, which is where the Art and Architecture School is, as well as the School of Engineering. And then there's the hilltop, which is just above and beyond Brookings. This relationship has always been this way and continues. And in the last few years, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this project. They completed what they called the East End transformation, where they essentially reimagined the entire fabric that tied together the existing buildings. So there was a historic alley that was much loved, but flooded by just parking lots that had been resultant over time of a campus that was not intended for vehicles, having to take on parking. So they buried the parking in a really forward-thinking way. The building that they built for parking is massive. Go forward and then go back. This is the hole that was there when they dug. But this parking garage is intended for a future where there are no cars. They built it with, I think there's 20-foot ceilings between levels so that they can, in the future, put labs or other academic functions inside of it. So this is kind of underpinning the entire East End at this point. So McKelvey is the building highlighted in red. It's the last building of the East End transformation to have been funded and started, which was actually great for us because they test ran all the contracting teams up to this point, and it really was a wonderful way, I think, for the university to end the process of building. But you can see it really occupies. This Skinker is a main through street. This is Forest Park over here on the right side of the screen. McKelvey is the front door of the campus. So this was a big deal because the front door of the campus is Brookings, right? So this is the most photographed, most well-known, most important building on campus. So McKelvey really had a job of being both lovely and a front door, but deferential to the existing and very important architecture that's on the campus. There are 19 buildings of the original Cope and Stewardson campus that are part of I think it's called the Danforth Historic District. They're all in the National Register. These are really important American Collegiate Gothic structures. So, as I mentioned, the East End used to be just a total sea of parking lot. You can see this is not long after the World's Fair. These are some of the remnants of the World's Fair projects. Art and Architecture is now over in this side, these buildings, and then on the north side of campus, Engineering, and then this parking zone between. What you can see from these photos as well is that you can see that Collegiate Gothic has creeped all the way down the hill and around the corner on this side, but there's none on this side. So McKelvey also played a really important role in figuring out how to tie those two together, which is not easy because it had to do both in the same building without looking like it was trying to be both things. So McKelvey, anchoring the corner, you can see interesting story. There's 1,000 stories for each of these projects, but this row of Collegiate Gothic buildings here essentially had the same design team over about a 20-year period. So Hillier Group in Philadelphia had a group of professionals, historic preservationists, architects, who started working along this line. When it got to here, the group broke up, and some of them went to Perkins Eastman in New York, and one of them went to my parents' office in Philadelphia. So I actually did construction administration on this building here, which is Green Hall, and the whole team stayed together, Perkins Eastman and Patterhn-Ives, for this last building on the corner. So it was a really nice way to keep that continuity. Everybody was very familiar with the trustees, kind of what it would take to build consensus around the design of a pretty complex and important cornerstone. So McKelvey, this is the final result. You can see Collegiate Gothic, fully Collegiate Gothic around the corners here, and then the curtain wall peeking around the edge, a nod to sort of this is a computer science building, extremely forward-thinking, important scientific things going on inside of it. that wanted to not just hide behind the collegiate Gothic facade, but also express itself toward this new, really beautifully reconceived campus interior space. So we worked really closely with Perkins Eastman from the start of the project, alongside with the university. Essentially, the way it was broken down was we worked on the shell and they worked on the interiors, but as anyone knows, in a good relationship, that's never, there was no clear lines. It really was a very integrated team, and we sort of, started as two groups kind of getting to know each other in a new capacity, and ended the project, feeling like we could all be in the same office. So we spent a lot of time working on materials, construction technologies. Even though there's a strong history of masonry construction on this campus, the way that these walls are built is not the way people usually build things now. So these are true masonry-bearing walls. Usually when you see brick or stone buildings going up right now, you see the studs going up first, and then you see some brick or stone hanging off of another secondary structure. There is no secondary structure here, so we're dealing with true bearing walls, which completely changes the way it's engineered, the way it's built. And so this project really asked kind of a lot of the design team and the construction team and the engineers to kind of be thinking forward, and we were fortunate to have a great contractor on board. They're excellent with masonry, so they knew what it was going to take to come to decisions like what you see at the bottom here. Again, curtain wall, this is the interior courtyard, really allowing views into the school. These are all circulation and sort of collaboration spaces along this edge. This is the face we're looking at right now is north facing, so beautiful natural light all day long. So we spend a lot of time in our office talking about materials. You've seen that on the first two projects. It's so important to go and see where the material comes from, how it comes out of the ground, how is it stored, then how is it broken down from these massive blocks, that how do you know what's inside of there, right? How are we going to decide what the right color is? What's the right texture? How much do you want to see of the history of the stone? And then taking it to the point of, who's cutting up the blocks into smaller pieces, who's making the relatively simple profiles, and then who's the right person to be carving things that really only a few people can do anymore. So we traveled to, I think, 4 different stone shops. This one was purely stone carving. The others were kind of a combination. And the university wanted to know not just what shop was doing it, but who was doing it, like which person's hand was going to be making these final pieces. On McKelvey, because it was connecting to a relatively elaborate building that turned the corner there, this one wanted some detail, but again, wanted to be deferential to its context. So there were a limited number of these really specialty carved pieces, but they were very important because they had to be executed and sort of be able to stand up to the context of, Brookings Hall right behind it. We went to extensive lengths with mock-ups on this project. So we had, this was one of the final 3, but there were probably 15 of these before this. And we were looking at everything from, this is a standalone panel that has the base granite, the red granite, and there's, variation in this that goes from dark pink to orange. So how many oranges do you want per panel was literally, that was specified. The striking of every joint, the color of the mortar, the tone of the limestone. This is a very iterative process and a great contracting team that went along with it. Likewise with, sampling of the quality levels that we could expect, because there was a budget on this too, so we couldn't say everything had to be perfect. So identifying which parts and pieces were the most important to kind of get right, and then eventually bringing them to the site, getting final approval on it. The windows and glass, likewise, we went to both. Winco, which is actually located in St. Louis, and they do all of the collegiate Gothic windows at WashU. So these arches proved to be especially challenging. So this was something we worked very closely with them on, getting the gasketing and all of the depth, appropriate. All of these little ins and outs that you see are not sort of the typical way that they build things. And then likewise, Wausau Curtain Wall was the curtain wall fabricator for the project, and we were asking for essentially a semi-customized system. So I'll show you in the next couple of slides. We did a lot of work to mitigate daylight going into the westward-facing glazing, and this required the use of essentially a standard system from the glass in, but a fully customized system from the glass out. So this, when you do curtain wall, it's like the basic price if you use something that they already have, because they're extruding these things, and then every single extrusion that is a different one costs you about $30,000. So you want to limit the number of those extra parts and pieces that you do. So the grand finale mock-up was this mock-up. We used this this stayed almost until substantial completion. That's how useful this mock-up was. In this image, this was sort of one of the early ones where we were trying to figure out, exactly what joint color and style wants to go in all of these different parts and pieces. But you can see that we were testing. There were a few concealed areas where we had a little bit of stucco. It continued to be useful. The stucco, there's some stucco hiding right up there. Mm-hmm. But we used this to test the joint striking. They water tested this this joint between the curtain wall and the masonry. This was probably like one of the most important moments in the whole project, because that was where you made it feel like the two things weren't crashing together. How big should this be? How deep should it be? What's the right glazing material in here? So this mock-up was really invaluable for testing almost everything that you see here and setting standards for the contractors across it. Again, just a super amazing construction process. All the structure that was below was cast in place concrete, and it was, just a massive endeavor that just felt like the concrete was never going to end. But it created, you get kind of nerd out about how beautiful it is to go inside of there. So curtain wall detailing, again, I think, we sort of learn across projects about this as you go. We had a facade consultant on this project specifically because we were trying to achieve some new and different things. But you can see, working from the base up, where this is a standard profile. This is our $30,000 custom. How do we carry through a logic of this whole thing where we're getting the depth and the appropriate relationship between the concrete structure and the stone as you go all the way up. So there are exterior and interior sunshades on this, which you can see in this image here. We 3D printed some of the potential profiles. That was something that I think there's a slide later here that shows all of them, but we went through a lot of different iterations, again, because nobody could make these without charging us to do the extrusion. So we had these all 3D printed to test it out and gain buy-in from the university. This was the very first of the curtain wall profile mock-ups. So there was this one, and then the other big one that I showed you before. This one we used primarily to agree on how everything was going to be fastened together, what was going to be exposed and what would be concealed. But the way that we made decisions about which type of profile to choose was some pretty robust thermal modeling. So you can see that when there's no shading, no problem on the north facing, but this is a pretty terrible place to work if you're in these labs. So we started breaking down the facade, and figuring out how we could provide the most shading across from the outside. And then likewise, from the inside, we use the light shelves to start to control the glare. So it's a dual system. Washington University is very committed to sustainability. This is a LEED Gold project. We had to meet some pretty high standards in order to make these spaces work, and we wanted to make that happen with the architecture itself. So making moves that are completely passive. You don't just have to put the curtains down. The building itself is smart in this way. So these are some studies that were done to test the interior light shelves. Just a few images of the curtain wall. And so this is the meeting of the two kind of types of facade, but then this is McKelvey also. So, they're really the juxtaposition and sort of careful siting and placement really was incredibly important, and that planning started from the beginning. The East End transformation has gotten a lot of great press for the university. That's very sustainable, meeting a lot of their goals for the future, and just creating a really lovely moment there at the opening for McKelvey Hall, and kind of satisfying both wishes of remaining collegiate Gothic, continuing this tradition and heritage, while still portraying from the outside, the kind of cutting edge research and important things that are happening inside the building. So, what's next? We have. I think the pandemic sort of slowed things down and made things trickle along, supply chain or decisions or whatever it happens to be. So we have a lot of things under construction, a lot of things precipitating this year. A few things we're really excited about. This is a renovation of a city hall that's in St. Louis. We did a robust study for them. They're putting into place the first phase of that, addressing a lot of issues with accessibility, but also gaining a nice exterior terrace and courtyard, rethinking some of their interior spaces to make their approach by the community more friendly and welcoming. This building was originally an orphanage, and it's not set up as a city hall, so there's a lot of sort of resultant use of the spaces that we're helping them kind of untangle. The middle image is, actually, as I was looking at those tent images, Eric, I think it's our second canopy plus pavilion. So this one is for a really cool neighborhood in St. Louis called Cherokee Street. It's highly diverse. They have a really strong Hispanic population. Just tons of life going on down there. Really cool shops, lots of live music. And they had this park, which was essentially an empty lot that had some asphalt on it, and it's used for basketball and community gatherings. We have helped them reimagine it. Similar uses, formal and informal basketball, but they got some really great funding from our local metropolitan sewer district, which allowed them to make it completely sustainable. It basically drains, like every drop of water that falls on the site goes back into the earth. And that allowed them to do some kind of amazing things. We're working with a great landscape architect partner, so that is under construction now. They're probably going to be lifting this is one giant truss.
Mm-hmm.
It's in 4 pieces right now. They're lifting it up next week, so we're pretty excited about that.
We all need to go down.
Yeah, it's definitely on
Camp
the
out.
yeah. And Eric, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure. And the third, it's a project that was confidential for many years, but we were engaged by the Walton Family Foundation to work with them to develop a prototypical food systems facility that has many unique features to it. But at the end of the day, it's intended to try to alleviate and resolve any number of food-related issues having to do with anything from agriculture to the food that you put on your plate for every meal. So really kind of amazing mission for all of these projects that we're looking forward to having next time. And so with that, we think Patterhn-Ives is a really special place. A lot of commitment, a lot of hard work. None of this happens easily or in a vacuum, with a lot of people collaborating with us. And so with that, we would love to have any questions or chat for a little bit. or if, want to come chat afterwards, we'll hang around for a little bit. But thank you again on behalf of everyone for the invitation, and we really enjoyed being here tonight. Faculty thought there might be some questions about what it means to start an office, a young office in its nascent stages. You don't want to ask us. So. But really, any questions? Happy to field. Sure. Who would like to field that one? Sure.
So everyone went home, during COVID, of course, and then there was sort of a trickle back. But now, at some point, I guess last spring, we asked everybody to come back because it's just too hard to do what we do virtually. It felt hard to maintain relationships among ourselves, to, roll out a piece of trace and, think about things, or even just kind of, architecture's hard and there's a lot of pressure, and it's just nice to be around people and kind of laugh about something that's not work. So it's felt for us that we are still rebuilding back from sort of pandemic times, but that being in person, we moved last year about this time, new space. Still, the way we've practiced since the beginning is sort of one long table. We started with probably three square IKEA tables, and I think we were up to 5, and then eventually we got offices. Now Tony's back at the table. Our way of working is really kind of everybody's in your space, but it's always worked for us because I think that people kind of like each other and generally get something out of the casual conversations that come from being near one another, which was challenging for COVID, but I think it's a rebuild. It's still a rebuild.
Come on, one more. Mm-hmm.
I do. So the question was about the parking garage at WashU. They are absolutely planning on a car-free future. And there are really interesting, the stairs that they built going down into there they look like Lou Kahn designed them. There's a beautiful courtyard outside of the architecture school that reaches down, fully planted, and they are absolutely intending to do that. I guess it depends on when the car-free future comes, but they would not have spent that kind of money if they hadn't been thinking about it. And I know that we were involved kind of early on in some of the planning conversations about the architecture school and their new building, because they got a new building as a part of this as well. And there was a lot of conversation about how do you physically connect the engineering and architecture school across the LA. And that's basically what this parking garage would serve as, that they could start to build that out for academic spaces that would bridge between architecture and engineering.
Yeah, there was some interesting conversations that Anna's hinting at that we were a part of early on. And a lot of universities are facing this issue. They're landlocked. I'm sure Knoxville is the same way. And we were actually in a meeting once with a person very well-informed, said that it would actually be less expensive to have cars that would go get students, buy them coffee on the way, bring them to campus, and drop them off where they needed to go, because there was just so much demand for space long term. And yeah, Anna's absolutely right. They have so many plans for that space that it's really kind of a stopgap at the moment. Pretty incredible. And those spaces are amazing. they're so amazing. Yeah. BNIM did the garage. Yeah. It's really nice. And it was the very first part of the project. That the whole project began with that garage. So there was a lot of thought that went into that particular piece. Pretty fascinating.
Thanks for the work. Thanks for sharing it. I really enjoyed the number and the range and the quality of the detail drawings that showed. I'm curious about the detail drawing as a site for design and what the office attitude is. It's clearly detail oriented. I'm not asking for you to say yes, we're detail oriented. Just what the workflow is in the office around the detail drawing.
I think Tony's going to field that one.
Yeah, Tony, you should answer that.
Yeah. No, that's a great question, Jason. I mean, first off, I think there's just a rigor that is generally just kind of understood in the office, I think. And that goes, in some ways, at all scales. And I think that's something that's taught in most schools, right? It's like, it doesn't matter if we're thinking about an urban plan or a detail, the same kind of rigor wants to try to be at every scale. And that's something that I think that we're committed to. And I think people, as they enter our office, just understand at some level that there's going to be rigor involved. But absolutely, I think when it comes time to thinking about detailing, and that's another, I think, unique piece, is that the detailing for us might come at an early stage where it may seem a bit premature, but we'll actually jump in and say, hey, this could be a detail that's informed by a larger scale, the scale of the building or the scale of the neighborhood. But once we're there and we're in heavy, hardcore detailing mode, there's absolutely, I think, a lot of material research, I think, that you've seen in the work, and opportunities to actually shift the nature of a project through the detail. And so, Eric likes to talk about, even in the shop drawing process in construction administration, that's another unique, or something that we feel we just care a lot about, that process. Eric likes to say that's the last opportunity to get it right, is through that shop drawing process. And so a lot of times we're vetting the detailing through what we learn from the subcontracting community and through the shop drawing process, and feed that back into how we might, the final detail for something, how systems might come together actually changes through that process of shop drawing and construction administration. I don't know if you guys have other aspects of that to add.
Yeah, maybe just one sort of story to add on here. I'm reminded, I was actually on a NAB visit, and was the AIAS president at the time was on the visit with us, and we were talking at lunch one day, and she was asking, like, what do we look for in new hires and students that are interviewing for us and so forth. And we presented, talked about a whole number of things, and I said, well, at the end of the day, we just want people that care. And I think Tony used the word care twice when he was answering your question. And for us, that's the most important thing. And so there's a level of care, and we, it was one of the pairings as well. There's a level of care in the office, I think, that is a differentiator for us that kind of matriculates its way through everything. We check each other's email. We draw in a really meticulous and careful way. Things are curated. And so it's just, that term comes up a lot, of just being care and careful as we're going through the process. We didn't talk about it at the beginning, we were a little nervous about time and things, but we always, we really began the office with this in mind, of trying to limit concurrent work and do things that would offer us the opportunity to sort of bring that care. Because we've all had experiences that were not that. and those are challenging. So I would say it's kind of a foundational idea for the office that I think all three of us believe strongly in, and that happens to come through in the details. We take our drawing sets very seriously. They're beautiful. They're beautiful drawings, and it also, we've joked about it. It saves our clients money. You have a clear set of drawings. You get 5 questions in an addendum to answer versus 500 or something. There's value there, and so it's paid off for us, and it's something we believe in. Yeah. So I really appreciate the question. Well, thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You guys want to fill that one? Well, first of all, I appreciate the spirit in the question, right? And in some ways, the answers are, yes to all of that, right? The project, there was a lot asked of the project, almost in an unfair way. In our minds, I think it was always conceived of as a canvas. And what was really pretty amazing at the very beginnings of that project, I remember we were in a meeting with the university president, the dean, the university architect, the provost, a super high level meeting. And we were the ones that were talking about all the potential, because it was really just like, hey, we want to just make a permanent pavilion. They didn't even call it pavilion. We want to make a permanent tent theater. Let's put up a permanent tent, because they paid $60,000 every year to take this thing up and put it back down. And just like we were saying earlier, there's all this demand and need for space. And so we just started talking about all of the potential and all of the things that they could potentially house there. And the idea of the art park and it being this moment for diversity and people to come together in community. And so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's meant to accommodate any number of things. And the way we sort of sculpted the ground allows that to occur, not just for theatrical use. They can come in with platforms and build the theater, but they can take the platforms away and it can sort of take on a very different meaning.
And during normal, outside of tent season, it looks one way.
Yeah.
And during tent, the curtains come up.
Yeah, the curtains.
There's curtains as part of the project that aren't in any of the photos, or in a few of the photos.
At the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it does take on a different quality during actual tent season.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question. I might jump in real quick and then I'll turn it over to Anna. In some ways, I feel like the answer sort of dovetails back to the detailing question, right? This whole notion of care. As a young office, for someone to invest in us, is a pretty amazing thing, right? And so we care a lot about our clients. We'll go a long way for our clients. And I think that care comes through in all of our work, and it sort of naturally becomes part of the sort of the community piece, right? I mean, Cole's a really great example of that, where, you know, we were warned, like, hey, you're going to stand up in front of 500 people and try to build consensus. And those meetings were always the most sort of wonderful, you know, kind of, I don't know, events. And I think people understand that. People know sincerity. They know care, right? They know when, and we actually, there's a testimonial that Tony likes to always refer to. What was it? It was something like, the folks at Patterhn-Ives are like old friends sitting across the table. They know they're not going to let you down, you know. And so I think those are what resonate with me. And so I think that's scalable, right? For any, whether it's one person that you're doing, you know, a kitchen for, or 500 people that you're trying to do a synagogue for, or an entire university that's trying to reimagine, you know, an entire half of their campus, right? So I don't know. I'll let Anna and Tony jump in, but I thought it was fitting that it would dovetail off of the other question.
Absolutely right. We didn't have a lot of choices when we first started, right? So when you first start, you're like, what can we do? And a lot of that does end up being maybe the work that other offices don't think is great. But we managed to turn all of those projects into something great. And that's really just an attitude. You know, I think that's this idea of care, that we're just going to try really hard and see what we can do here. I mean, one of the first projects that we won without any connections, just could not believe that we got it, was the renovation of a dormitory for Lincoln University that had been mothballed for 10 years. It had been used as a haunted house. I mean, it was really not, when you're like, wow, this is an exciting project.
It was in rough shape, yeah.
It was a nightmare. But it was like, you get to know the people who are going to be using it, and you get to, you know, meet the people who are running this university and just really trying to get these students onto campus. They had a housing shortage, you know, and they had more students than they could fit. So it becomes meaningful when you allow it to become meaningful, and that sort of builds the consensus around it. I think the other part of your question, you know, like this Love Bank Park piece, that's a project that we identified. They put out a request for qualifications for an architect. We're intending to pay for an architect, but we decided we were going to do it for basically nothing. So we told them we would do it for, you know, a small fee, and we would, you know, take them through the whole thing. And you know, it's been a very extended process, but it's been completely worth it, because you've got a stakeholder who just really they appreciate, you know, what we brought to the table in terms of our skill, and not excuse me, because of the financial aspects of it. I'm sure that was helpful, but you know, they know that our team did a great job. They love the design. You know, finding the right client, the right community clients is really key, and I think that's something that we couldn't know when we first started. You know, we just kind of went into it with like a, you know, puppy eyes, and just, you know, we're so excited to be here. Now we have better identified the kind of projects that are good fits for our office, where we can really maximize our impact. You know, we can't do everything, but we can do a few things for the right clients really, really well.
Yes, thank you, guys. Good question.